The cabin lights flickered once before going dark, and that's when Carter Rhodes saw the gun pressed against the little girl's temple. At 38,000 feet, trapped in a luxury private jet with 3 armed hijackers, nobody dared to breathe. Nobody except the quiet single dad in seat 7 amperes, whose calloused hands slowly unclenched, whose combat-trained mind began calculating angles and distances, knowing he had seconds before everything went wrong. The terrified 9-year-old was Elise Porter, daughter of tech billionaire Bianca Anderson, and the men holding her weren't after money, they wanted something far more valuable. What happened in the next 47 minutes would shatter every assumption about courage, desperation, and the unbreakable bond between a parent and someone else's precious one. Drop a comment with your city below, and let me know where in the world this story has reached. Now, let's begin where it all started, with a man who just wanted to get home to his own daughter. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The scream cut through the recycled air of the Gulfstream G650 like a knife through silk. Carter Rhodes had been staring out the window at the dark expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, trying not to think about the birthday cake waiting in his refrigerator back in Portland, when everything went sideways. It started with the co-pilot stumbling into the main cabin, blood streaming from a gash above his eye, hands raised in surrender. Behind him came a man wearing a black ski mask, Glock 19, held with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how to use it. Then 2 more masked figures emerged from the cockpit, moving with military precision down the narrow aisle of the luxury jet. Carter's training kicked in before his conscious mind could process what was happening. His eyes cataloged everything in 3 seconds flat. 3 hostiles, all armed, tactical movements, suggesting professional training. 12 passengers, most frozen, in various states of shock. The jet's layout, exits limited to emergency doors at 38,000 feet, essentially useless. And there, in seat 3 amperes, a woman, in an expensive charcoal suit, instinctively pulling a young girl close to her chest. Bianca Anderson. Carter recognized her from the tech magazines his daughter Summer loved to read. The 4-year-old CEO of Nexcore Industries, the artificial intelligence company that had revolutionized everything from medical diagnostics to climate prediction. Forbes had called her the most influential tech leader under 40. Right now, she looked like any other terrified mother trying to shield her daughter from danger. The girl, maybe 9 or 10 years old, had her mother's dark hair and sharp features. She wore headphones around her neck and clutched a tablet that displayed some kind of coding program. Even in crisis, Carter's brain registered the detail. The young one was smart, probably brilliant if she was already programming at that age. Nobody moves, nobody dies, the lead hijacker announced, his accent placing him somewhere in Eastern Europe. Russia, maybe Ukraine. We are not here to hurt anyone. We simply need something from Miss Anderson, and then we all go home to our families. He walked directly to Bianca, gun never wavering. Miss Anderson. Such a pleasure. I am Victor, my associates, and I require access to your quantum encryption algorithm, the one you have been so carefully hiding from your own board of directors. Carter watched Bianca's face go pale. Whatever this Victor was talking about, it was clearly not public knowledge. I don't know what you're talking about, Bianca said, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. Nexcore doesn't work on encryption. We focus on predictive AI. Victor laughed, a sound without humor. Please, do not insult my intelligence. For 6 months, you have been developing unhackable encryption. Governments would pay billions for this technology. Criminal organizations would pay more. And we have already been paid quite handsomely to acquire it. He pulled out a laptop, setting it on the tray table in front of her. You will access your private server and transfer the algorithm to this device. You have 10 minutes. And if I refuse? Victor's response was to grab Elise by her hair, yanking the girl away from her mother and pressing his gun against her temple. The young one's scream of terror made every passenger flinch. Then I will show your daughter what happens to people who refuse very reasonable requests, Victor said calmly. Starting with her fingers. 1 every minute you delay. She has 10 fingers. Miss Anderson, I wonder how many she will have left when you finally cooperate. That's when Carter knew he had to act. He'd seen men like Victor before, in places he tried hard not to remember, places where Geneva Conventions were jokes and human life was currency to be spent. This man would absolutely torture that girl if it served his purpose. The only question was timing. Carter forced himself to stay perfectly still in seat 7 amperes, just another terrified passenger. Let them think he was no threat. Let them ignore the quiet man in worn jeans and a faded blue Henley who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Bianca's fingers were shaking as she opened the laptop. The encryption is stored on a private server. I need my phone to authenticate the connection. Victor nodded to one of his associates, who retrieved Bianca's designer purse and dumped the contents on the seat. Phone, wallet, lipstick, business cards scattered across the leather. The hijacker handed her the phone, keeping his own weapon trained on the other passengers. Carter used the distraction to assess his options. Victor was the primary threat, holding Elise. Associate 1 was watching the other passengers with his weapon. Associate 2 was near the cockpit door, presumably keeping the pilot cooperative. The co-pilot was zip-tied to a seat near the galley, conscious but dazed. 3 against 1 were bad odds in an enclosed space, with innocent people in the crossfire. But Carter had worked with worse. In Kandahar, in Mosul, in a dozen other places where the odds said you couldn't win but you did anyway because the alternative was unacceptable. He caught Bianca's eye for just a moment. She was looking around the cabin, desperate for help, for someone to do something. Their gazes met and held for a heartbeat. Carter gave the slightest nod. Not a promise, just an acknowledgement. I see you, I see your daughter. I'm here. Something in Bianca's posture relaxed fractionally. She returned her attention to the laptop, typing slowly, buying time. You are stalling, Victor observed. This is unwise. Dmitri, bring me the bolt cutters from the cockpit. The young girl whimpered, understanding what was coming. Bianca's typing became frantic. No, wait, it's authenticating. The server is in California. The connection speed is slow at this altitude. Please, just give me another minute. Carter shifted slightly in his seat, drawing his feet under him in a position that looked like nervous fidgeting but was actually preparation for explosive movement. The hijackers had made a critical mistake. They'd assumed a private jet full of tech executives and venture capitalists presented no physical threat. They'd gotten comfortable. Comfortable gets you killed. Victor was focused entirely on the laptop screen, watching the progress bar creep forward. Associate 1 had lowered his weapon slightly, no longer seeing the frozen passengers as threats. Associate 2 was partially obscured by the cockpit door frame. Carter's mind ran through the sequence. 3 moves, maybe 4 seconds total. Disable Victor without hitting Elise. Acquire his weapon. Neutralize Associate 1 before he could fire. Then deal with Associate 2. Simple, brutal, necessary. The laptop chimed. Access granted, Bianca said quietly. Victor smiled, releasing his grip on Elise's hair but keeping the gun pressed to her head. You see, cooperation is so much more pleasant than the alternative. Now, transfer the files to the external drive I am inserting. He reached into his pocket with his free hand. That was the opening, the fraction of a second when his attention split between the gun, the girl, and the USB drive. Carter moved. His body launched from seat 7 amperes with the explosive power of a spring uncoiling, 7 feet of distance covered in less than a second. His left hand clamped down on Victor's wrist, forcing the gun away from Elise's head. His right elbow drove into Victor's throat, with enough force to crush the cartilage. Victor's gun discharged. The sound deafening in the enclosed cabin. The bullet punched through the ceiling, depressurization alarms immediately screaming. Oxygen masks dropped from overhead compartments as Carter ripped the weapon from Victor's grip and used the man's own body as a shield. Associate 1 was bringing his weapon up when Carter fired twice. Center mass. The hijacker went down. Associate 2 emerged from the cockpit, gun raised. Carter shoved Victor's gasping body forward into the aisle and dropped low, firing 3 times. 2 hits, One miss. Associate 2 collapsed. The entire sequence took 4.3 seconds. Then silence, broken only by the rush of air through the bullet hole and the continued wailing of alarms. Passengers were screaming, crying, frozen in shock. Elise stood exactly where Victor had released her, eyes wide, unable to process what had just happened. Carter kept the gun trained on the 3 downed hijackers, checking each for signs of continued threat. Victor was clutching his throat, unable to breathe properly, but alive. The other 2 weren't moving. "Everyone stay in your seats," Carter commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed in crisis situations. "Miss Anderson, take your daughter to the back of the cabin. Someone get that co-pilot untied. We need to secure these men and get that bullet hole sealed before we lose too much cabin pressure." Bianca seemed to shake herself out of shock. She grabbed Elise, pulling her close, then looked at Carter with an expression somewhere between gratitude and disbelief. "Who are you?" she asked. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Carter Rhodes, ma'am. And right now, I'm the person trying to keep this plane from crashing into the Atlantic Ocean. 18 hours earlier, Carter Rhodes had been having a significantly worse day, which was saying something considering he'd just prevented a hijacking at 38,000 feet. The morning had started at 5:47 a.m. in his modest 2-bedroom apartment in North Portland, with his 11-year-old daughter Summer shaking his shoulder with the kind of urgency usually reserved for actual emergencies. Dad, wake up. Today's the day." Carter groaned, forcing one eye open to peer at his daughter. Summer was already dressed in her robotics club t-shirt, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, eyes bright with excitement that no human should possess before 6 in the morning. "The competition isn't until Saturday, baby girl," he mumbled, trying to pull the blanket back over his head. "That's 2 days away. Let your old man sleep. Not the competition. Today's your interview. Portland Tech Solutions. Remember? Assistant Director of Corporate Security. You cannot be late for this." Carter sat up, suddenly awake. Right. The interview. The job that would mean actual benefits, actual career advancement, actual ability to afford Summer's robotics camp next summer, instead of scraping together funds from overtime shifts at 3 different security gigs. He glanced at his phone. The interview was at 9 a.m. downtown. Then he had an afternoon shift at the convention center, an evening shift providing security for a corporate event, and if he was lucky, he'd make it home by 11 to help Summer finish her science project. "You know what day it is, right?" Summer asked, perching on the edge of his bed with a knowing smile. Carter's stomach dropped. "Please tell me I didn't forget your birthday again." "Relax, that's not until March. But you did forget what you promised me." He ran through his mental calendar, coming up empty. Summer rolled her eyes with the exasperated patience of a young person dealing with a hopelessly forgetful parent. "The next Core Tech Summit? The one with Bianca?" Anderson speaking. "You promised you'd try to get me an autograph since you're providing security for it." "Right. The corporate event tonight was some kind of exclusive tech industry gathering. Carter was part of the security team hired to stand around looking intimidating while wealthy people networked and made deals worth more than his annual salary. I'll do my best, but you know I can't just walk up to the speakers. You have to try, Dad. Bianca Anderson is literally the most amazing person in tech right now. She started coding when she was 7, built her first AI algorithm at 15, founded NextCore at 26. She has a daughter around my age who she's raising alone while running a billion-dollar company. She's like proof that women can do anything in STEM." Carter smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm. Carter smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm. Carter smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm. Carter smiled. Carter smiled. Carter smiled. Summer had inherited her mother's brilliance and none of her flakiness, thank God. When Elena had walked out 3 years ago, claiming motherhood was stifling her creative energy, Summer had been 8 years old. She'd cried for exactly one evening, then announced she was going to be too busy building robots to worry about people who didn't want to be there. "That's my girl," Carter thought. "I promise I'll try," he said. "Now, let me get ready for this interview so I can afford to keep you in circuit boards and servos." The interview at Portland Tech Solutions went about as well as Carter expected, which is to say it was professional, cordial, and ultimately disappointing. The hiring manager, a woman named Lydia Chambers in an immaculate suit, spent 40 minutes asking him questions about threat assessment and crisis management before delivering the gentle letdown. "Your experience is impressive, Mr. Rhodes. Really impressive. But most of our clients prefer security directors with formal degrees in criminal justice or business management. The market's very competitive right now." Translation: You're qualified, but other candidates have better credentials, on paper. Never mind that Carter had spent 6 years in situations where the wrong decision meant people died, where he'd learned threat assessment in places that made corporate security look like kindergarten patrol. "I understand," Carter said, shaking her hand. "Thank you for your time." Walking back to his truck, a 2008 Ford F-150 that burned oil and made concerning noises on cold mornings, Carter did the math. Without this job, he was looking at another year of juggling multiple gigs. Another year of summer having to stay at the neighbors when his shifts ran late. Another year of being too tired to help with homework because he'd worked 18 hours straight. His phone buzzed. A text from Elena, his ex-wife, the first communication in 4 months. "Heard through mutual friends, you're struggling. Maybe Summer should come live with me for a while. I'm in Seattle now." More stable situation. Carter's jaw clenched. Elena had sent maybe 5 birthday cards in 3 years. Called, occasionally, when she remembered Summer existed. Contributed exactly $0 in support, despite court orders she simply ignored, and Carter didn't have the money to enforce. Now she wanted custody because she'd heard he was struggling. He deleted the message without responding. The afternoon shift at the convention center was mind-numbing. 4 hours of standing near an exit, watching a home and garden show, making sure nobody stole the expensive kitchen fixtures on display. The highlight was stopping a toddler from climbing into a hot tub display. By the time he got to the evening event at the Riverside Grand Hotel, excuse me, different location. By the time he got to the evening event at the Cascade Summit Hotel, Carter was running on coffee and determination. The next Core Tech Summit was in the hotel's largest ballroom, a space filled with enough technology and wealth to fund a small country. Carter's job was simple. Stand near the VIP entrance, check credentials, look professional. His supervisor, a perpetually stressed man named Anthony White, gave him the standard briefing. High-profile attendees tonight. Bianca Anderson from Nextcore is the keynote. She's traveling with her daughter, so security's extra tight. We're expecting about 200 guests, all pre-screened. Any problems? Radio immediately. Questions? No, sir. The event proceeded smoothly for the first hour. Tech executives in expensive suits networking over expensive wine, discussing things Carter barely understood. Quantum computing, neural networks, blockchain integration. It was like listening to people speak a foreign language while pretending it was normal conversation. Then Bianca Anderson arrived, and Carter understood why Summer idolized her. She moved through the room with the kind of confidence that came from knowing you were the smartest person present, not arrogant, just aware. She wore a navy dress that probably cost more than his truck, but she'd paired it with sneakers, a detail that made her seem more human. At her side was a young girl, her daughter, presumably, looking uncomfortable in a formal dress but carrying herself with the same quiet confidence as her mother. Carter watched them make their way through the crowd, Bianca stopping to greet people, the girl politely shaking hands when introduced. They had the practiced rhythm of a team that had done this many times before. He thought about Summer, home alone, probably working on her robotics project, heating up the leftover pasta he'd made yesterday. The guilt was familiar, a constant companion. He was doing his best, but his best meant his daughter spent too many evenings alone while he worked to keep them afloat. Near the end of the evening, as guests were leaving, Carter noticed Bianca and her daughter near the exit. The young one was typing something on a tablet, while her mother finished a conversation with an older businessman. Carter made a split-second decision that violated about 3 security protocols. He approached them, keeping his posture respectful and non-threatening. "Miss Anderson, I apologize for the intrusion. I'm part of the security team tonight. My daughter Summer is 11, and she's a huge admirer of your work. She's in robotics club at school, wants to study AI development. Would you be willing to sign something for her?" Bianca looked at him, and Carter saw her size him up in about 2 seconds. Security guard in an ill-fitting rental uniform, asking for an autograph. She probably got this constantly. But instead of the polite dismissal he expected, she smiled. "What's your daughter's name again?" "Summer. Summer Rhodes." "Let me guess. She's named after summer break. And you were hoping she'd be as bright and warm as the season?" "Actually, she was born during the worst summer heat wave in Portland history. My ex-wife went into labor during a blackout. Summer seemed appropriate." Bianca laughed. And her daughter looked up from her tablet, interested now. "I like that. Elise, give me something to write on." The young girl handed over a small notebook, and Bianca wrote a quick message, signing it with a flourish. She handed it to Carter. "Tell Summer that the best thing she can do is never stop asking questions. And that being one of the only women in the room means you have to be twice as good, but that's okay because we usually are. Thank you, ma'am. This will mean the world to her." As he turned to leave, Bianca called out, "Mr. Rhodes, I noticed you checking the room every 30 seconds all evening. Threat assessment pattern, military?" Carter nodded. "Yes, ma'am, 6 years. And now you're working hotel security." "For now. Just trying to take care of my daughter." Something shifted in Bianca's expression. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition of a fellow single parent doing whatever it took. "Good luck with that," she said quietly. "It's the hardest job there is." 3 hours later, Carter was on an overnight flight to Boston for a last-minute security consulting gig, a one-day job that paid triple his usual rate. He'd had to call the neighbor to stay with Summer overnight, had to promise her chocolate chip pancakes when he got back, had to ignore the guilt that came with leaving his daughter again. The private jet was a perk of the consulting job. The client had booked him a seat on a partially full charter flight heading to the East Coast. Carter settled into seat 7 amperes, grateful for the legroom and the fact that he might actually sleep during the flight. That's when he noticed her. 3 rows ahead, traveling with her daughter, Bianca Anderson from the event earlier that evening. What were the odds? Carter decided not to bother her. She'd been kind earlier, but that didn't mean she wanted to be recognized on a flight. He pulled out his phone, looking at the photo of Summer that was his lock screen. 11 years old, holding the first-place trophy from her school's science fair, grinning like she'd conquered the world. Everything he did was for that smile. The jet's engines roared to life. Carter closed his eyes, trying to grab a few hours of sleep before landing. He had no way of knowing that in 3 hours, everything would change. That the quiet act of kindness from earlier, that small moment of connection, would become something infinitely more complicated. Sometimes fate doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it just puts you in seat 7 amperes, when the world decides to go sideways. The first sign something was wrong came 40 minutes into the flight, when Carter's trained instincts picked up movement that didn't match normal cabin patterns. He'd been dozing, not quite asleep, maintaining the light awareness that came from years of sleeping in places where letting your guard down could kill you. The plane had reached cruising altitude, cabin lights dimmed, most passengers settling in for the red-eye flight across the country. Carter's eyes opened without him consciously deciding to open them. Something felt off. The co-pilot was walking through the cabin toward the cockpit, but his gait was wrong. Too stiff, hands held slightly away from his body in a position that suggested restraint or injury. As he passed under one of the reading lights still on, Carter saw it, a thin line of blood trailing down from his hairline. Then, the man in the ski mask emerged from the forward lavatory. Training took over. Carter's body flooded with adrenaline, his mind shifting into tactical mode. He kept his eyes mostly closed, watching through his lashes, cataloging details. Male, approximately 6 feet tall, athletic build. Glock 19 inches right hand, professional grip, moving with military precision. 2 more masked figures emerged behind him from what Carter now realized had been a coordinated reveal. They'd been hiding, waiting for the right moment. The lead hijacker grabbed the co-pilot by the collar, shoving him forward into the main cabin. The co-pilot stumbled, catching himself on a seatback, and that's when passengers started noticing. The first scream came from an older woman in seat 4B. "Quiet," the lead hijacker commanded, his voice carrying an Eastern European accent. Everyone remain calm. Nobody moves. Phones on the floor, now. The cabin erupted in controlled chaos. Passengers fumbling for their phones, dropping them into the aisle. Some crying, others frozen in shock. Carter watched Bianca Anderson 3 rows ahead instinctively pull her daughter close, her body language protective but controlled. The young girl, Elise, had been watching something on her tablet. Now she clutched it against her chest, eyes wide with fear but not quite panicking. Smart young one, Carter thought. She was scared but thinking, not giving in to hysteria. One of the other hijackers moved down the aisle, collecting phones and tablets in a black duffel bag. When he reached Elise, he held out his hand expectantly. The tablet, now. Elise looked at her mother. Bianca gave a small nod. The girl handed it over reluctantly. "Good," the hijacker said. "Very good. Everyone cooperating makes this so much simpler." The lead hijacker, the one Carter was mentally designating as Victor based on his command presence, moved to stand in the center of the aisle, where everyone could see him. "I apologize for the disruption to your evening," he said with mocking politeness. "We will be making an unscheduled detour. Once we have what we came for, you will all be released unharmed. But first, I need to have a conversation with Miss Bianca Anderson." Every eye in the cabin turned to Bianca. She remained still, her face carefully neutral. "Miss Anderson, please do not insult our intelligence by pretending you are not aboard. We have very accurate passenger manifests." Victor walked down the aisle until he stood directly beside her row. "There she is, the genius herself. Creator of the future, they call you. But you have been keeping secrets, have you not?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Bianca said, her voice steady. "The quantum encryption algorithm. The one currently worth approximately $3 billion to certain interested parties. The one you have been developing in secret, even hiding it from your own board of directors." Carter saw Bianca's micro-expression shift. Surprise, fear, confirmation. Whatever Victor was talking about was real, and she knew exactly what he meant. "I have no idea." Victor moved with startling speed, grabbing Elise by her hair and yanking her out of her seat. The young girl cried out in pain and terror. He pressed the Glock against her temple, hard enough to leave a mark. "Let us try this again," Victor said calmly. "But this time, consider carefully before you lie. Because every lie you tell, I hurt your daughter. Shall we test this system?" "No." Bianca's composure shattered. "Don't hurt her, please. Then do not lie to me. You have been developing unhackable encryption technology, military-grade quantum algorithms that would render every current security system obsolete. Governments would kill for this. Criminal organizations have already paid us quite handsomely to acquire it. And you are going to give it to us." One of the other hijackers brought a quidden of criminal organizations have already paid us quite. Laptop forward, setting it on Bianca's tray table. Victor kept the gun pressed to Elise's head, his other hand tangled in her hair, keeping her immobilized. "You will access your private server and transfer all files related to the quantum project to the external drive I provide. You have exactly 10 minutes before I start removing your daughter's fingers." The casual nature of the threat made it worse. Victor wasn't posturing. He was stating simple facts. Comply or watch your daughter be mutilated. Carter remained motionless in his seat, barely breathing. his mind running through scenarios at lightning speed. 3 armed hijackers, 12 passengers, including 2 young women in their 20s, an elderly couple, several businessmen, who looked like they'd never thrown a punch in their lives. The pilot was presumably being held at gunpoint in the cockpit. The co-pilot was zip-tied to a seat near the galley, conscious but dazed. Taking down 3 armed men in an enclosed space without getting anyone killed was nearly impossible. Nearly. Carter had done impossible before. The key was timing. And opportunity. Right now, he had neither. Victor was too alert, too focused. His associates were positioned well, covering different angles of the cabin. Any move Carter made would result in Elise getting shot. So he waited, watching, analyzing, looking for the opening he needed. Bianca's hands shook as she opened the laptop. The encryption is on a secure server. I need my phone to authenticate. Victor nodded to one of his associates, who retrieved Bianca's purse from the overhead bin and dumped the contents across her seat. Phone, wallet, makeup, business cards scattered. Use it. But understand, we are monitoring every keystroke. Any attempt to alert authorities or wipe the data, and your daughter loses her right hand. Am I clear? Yes. Bianca whispered. She picked up her phone with trembling fingers, beginning the authentication process. Carter noticed her eyes darting around the cabin, looking for help, for options, for anything. Their gazes met for a fraction of a second. He gave the smallest nod. Not a promise, just acknowledgement. I see you. I see your daughter. I'm here. Something in Bianca's posture changed. Not relaxation, exactly, but a subtle shift. She'd recognized something in Carter, some quality that said he was different from the other passengers. Maybe it was the way he was sitting, alert despite appearing relaxed. Maybe it was something she'd noticed earlier at the event, the automatic threat assessment behavior she'd called out. She returned her attention to the laptop, typing with deliberate slowness, buying time. The server is in California, she said. Connection speed at this altitude is slow. It's authenticating now. You have 7 minutes. Victor said, use them wisely. One of the other hijackers moved down the aisle, checking passengers to ensure no one was trying to be heroic. When he reached Carter, their eyes met briefly. The hijacker saw what everyone saw, a tired-looking man in his mid-30s, wearing jeans and a Henley, no obvious threat. He moved on. First mistake. Carter used the hijacker's momentary inattention to shift his position slightly. It looked like nervous fidgeting, adjusting in an uncomfortable seat. In reality, he was drawing his feet underneath him, coiling his legs into a position that would allow explosive forward movement. His hands, which had been resting on the armrests, moved to his lap, closer to his center of gravity. Small adjustments. Subtle preparations. The kind of things that looked like nothing but meant everything. Authentication complete, Bianca announced. I'm accessing the server now. Victor leaned over to look at the screen, gun still pressed against Elise's temple, but his attention momentarily divided. The young girl had tears streaming down her face, but she wasn't making a sound. Brave young one, Carter thought. She understood that staying quiet, staying still, gave her the best chance. The laptop screen showed a progress bar. File transfer initiating. Victor smiled. You see how much simpler this is when everyone cooperates? In 20 minutes, we land at a private airstrip. You and your daughter go free. Everyone goes home. No one needs to die tonight. That's when Carter knew Victor was lying. You don't hijack a private jet, steal billions in proprietary technology, and leave witnesses who can identify you. The moment that file transfer completed, everyone on this plane became a liability, which meant Carter's window for action was closing rapidly. He watched Victor's positioning. The gun was in his right hand, pressed against the right side of Elise's head. His left hand was tangled in her hair, controlling her movement. His body was partially shielded by hers, making a clean shot nearly impossible even if Carter had a weapon. But Victor had made a critical error in threat assessment. He'd assumed the greatest danger came from the wealthy passengers, the ones with resources and connections. He was watching Bianca, watching the businessmen, watching anyone who looked important. He wasn't watching the quiet man in seat 7 amperes. Second mistake. The laptop chimed. Transfer at 40%, Bianca said. Excellent. You have made the wise choice, Miss Anderson. Victor's associate, near the cockpit, called out something in Russian. Victor responded in the same language, a brief exchange that Carter couldn't understand but could interpret from body language. Something about the pilot, about course corrections, about timing. The associate moved slightly away from the cockpit door, reaching for something in his pocket. A phone, maybe. Or a radio. Third mistake. Carter's body was already moving before his conscious mind made the decision. 6 years of training overrode thought, replaced it with action. 7 feet of distance closed in less than a second. His left hand shot out, grabbing Victor's wrist and forcing the LOM gun away from Elise's head with controlled violence. His right elbow drove into Victor's throat, targeting the larynx with enough force to disrupt breathing without crushing the windpipe completely. Victor's gun discharged. The sound was catastrophic in the enclosed cabin. Ears ringing, passengers screaming. The bullet punched through the ceiling, missing everyone but immediately triggering decompression alarms. Oxygen masks dropped from overhead compartments as Carter ripped the weapon from Victor's hand. He used the hijacker's body as a shield, spinning him around as the associate near the passengers brought his own weapon up. Carter fired twice. Center mass. The training was automatic, muscle memory from 1,000 repetitions on ranges in places he tried not to remember. The associate went down. The third hijacker was emerging from the cockpit, weapon raised. Carter shoved Victor's gasping body forward into the aisle, dropped into a crouch, and fired 3 times. 2 hits, 1 miss. The third hijacker collapsed against the cockpit door frame. 4.3 seconds. 3 hostiles neutralized. 1 bullet hole in the fuselage slowly depressurizing the cabin. The silence after was somehow louder than the gunfire. Carter kept the weapon trained on the downed hijackers, checking each for continued threat. Victor was clutching his throat, unable to breathe properly but alive. The other 2 weren't moving. He kicked their weapons away, sliding them toward the back of the cabin out of reach. Everyone stay in your seats, Carter commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd given orders in far worse situations. Miss Anderson, take your daughter to the rear of the cabin. Someone get that co-pilot untied. We need to seal that bullet hole before we lose too much pressure. For a moment, nobody moved. They were frozen, processing what had just happened. A quiet passenger had just killed or incapacitated 3 armed hijackers in less than 5 seconds. Then Bianca moved. She grabbed Elise, pulling her close, the young girl sobbing now that the immediate danger had passed. They stumbled toward the back of the plane. One of the businessmen, shaking but functional, moved to help the co-pilot. Another passenger, a young woman who identified herself as a nurse, started checking the downed hijackers. Carter approached the cockpit carefully, weapon ready. Pilot, I'm coming in. Friendly. The cockpit door opened. The pilot, a gray-haired man in his 50s, looked at Carter with wide eyes. Who the hell are you? Someone who really needs you to fly this plane. What's our situation? Bullet hole in the fuselage. We're losing cabin pressure. I need to descend to 10,000 feet immediately. Nearest airport is Halifax, about 40 minutes out. Do it. I'll help seal that hole. Carter turned back to the cabin. Passengers were starting to come out of shock, some crying, others just staring. Bianca was in the back, holding Elise, whispering something to her daughter. Their eyes met across the cabin. Who are you? Bianca asked, her voice barely audible over the rush of air through the bullet hole. Carter Rhodes, and right now, I'm just trying to keep us all alive until we land. But even as he said it, as he helped fashion a temporary seal over the bullet hole, using duct tape from the emergency kit and a seat cushion, as he checked vitals on the unconscious hijackers and secured Victor with zip ties, Carter knew this moment had changed everything. He'd saved Bianca Anderson and her daughter. He'd prevented the theft of technology worth billions. He'd done what he always did when someone was in danger, acted without hesitation. And somehow, he suspected, his life was about to become far more complicated than it had been 18 hours ago when he'd just been a single dad trying to make rent and keep his daughter in robotics camp. The emergency landing in Halifax was controlled chaos. Canadian authorities met the plane with ambulances, police vehicles, and what looked like half the airport's security force. Carter had zip-tied Victor and checked the other two hijackers, confirming what he already knew. Both were dead. Clean shots, no suffering, exactly as he'd been trained. He should have felt something about that. Regret, maybe, or guilt, but all he felt was the familiar numbness that came from doing what was necessary. He'd worry about his conscience later, when everyone was safe. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police separated the passengers for interviews. Carter found himself in a small office with two officers, Detective Landon Pierce and his partner, Detective Amber Maxwell. They were professional, thorough, and clearly uncertain how to process what had happened. "Let me make sure I understand," Pierce said, reviewing his notes. "Three armed hijackers took control of a private jet. You, a passenger with no law enforcement authority, single-handedly neutralized all three in under 5 seconds. Yes, sir. And your background is what exactly?" "Security consultant. Before that, 6 years in specialized operations." Maxwell leaned forward. "Specialized operations. That's deliberately vague." "Yes, ma'am, it is." She studied him for a long moment. "Mr. Rhodes, we're going to need more details. 2 men are dead. That requires justification." Carter met her gaze steadily. A gun was pressed against a young girl's temple. The hijacker had already threatened to torture her. "I assessed the situation and determined immediate action was necessary to prevent loss of innocent life. Everything I did was within the scope of defending others from imminent harm." Pierce and Maxwell exchanged glances. "We'll need to verify your background," Pierce said. "This is going to take several hours." "I understand. Can someone call my daughter? She's home alone in Portland. She's 11. She'll be worried if I don't check in." Maxwell's expression softened slightly. "We'll arrange it. We'll arrange it." 4 hours later, Carter was released pending further investigation. The self-defense claim was solid, witnesses confirmed his account, and the hijackers' weapons and stated intentions left little doubt about the threat level. The Canadian authorities weren't happy about the deaths, but they weren't charging him either. He emerged from the police station into dawn light, exhausted, and running on fumes. His phone had 17 missed calls, 3 from Summer, 6 from his various employers, probably wondering why he'd missed shifts, 8 from a number he didn't recognize. He called Summer first. "Dad. Oh my God, are you okay? It's all over the news. They're saying there was a hijacking and shooting, and you're the one who stopped it. Please tell me you're okay." "I'm fine, baby girl. Completely fine. I'll be home as soon as I can get a flight." "You saved Bianca Anderson and her daughter. Dad, do you understand how amazing that is?" Carter smiled despite his exhaustion. "I was just doing what needed doing. Miss Anderson's been on TV talking about you, calling you a hero, saying you saved her daughter's life. This is incredible. It's complicated. Listen, I need to sort out getting home. Are you okay staying with Mrs. Curtis next door for another night?" "Yeah, but Dad, I'm really proud of you." His throat tightened. "Thanks, sweetheart. I love you. Love you too. Come home safe." He hung up and was immediately approached by a woman in an expensive suit. She looked like she hadn't slept either, but her professional demeanor never wavered. "Mr. Rhodes? I'm Kiana Ford, head of security for Nextcore Industries. Miss Anderson would like to speak with you. She's at a hotel nearby, giving her statement to authorities. She asked if you'd meet her when you're finished here." Carter hesitated. He wanted nothing more than to get home to Summer. But something in Kiana's expression suggested this wasn't really a request. "Lead the way." The hotel suite where Bianca was, Staying was nicer than anywhere Carter had ever been. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Halifax Harbor, furniture that probably cost more than his truck, art on the walls that looked original rather than prints. Bianca was sitting on a couch, still wearing the same clothes from the flight, now rumpled and stained. Elise was curled up beside her, asleep with her head in her mother's lap. Both looked exhausted. "Mr. Rhodes," Bianca said quietly, careful not to wake her daughter. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "Ma'am, I really should get back to Portland. My daughter is waiting." "I know, and I promise I won't keep you long. But I needed to say this in person, not through lawyers or press releases." She gently moved Elise's head to a pillow, standing to face him directly. "You saved our lives. If you hadn't acted when you did, Victor would have killed us all once he got what he wanted. I'm certain of that. You don't know that." "Yes, I do. I've dealt with corporate espionage before, Mr. Rhodes. Those men weren't planning to leave witnesses. You understood that, which is why you moved when you did." Carter didn't argue. She was right. "Men. My company will cover any legal expenses you incur from this incident," Bianca continued. "We'll also provide compensation for your time, for missed work, for anything you need." "That's not necessary." "It absolutely is. But more than that, I have a question for you." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "What you did on that plane, that wasn't luck or adrenaline. That was training and instinct and split-second decision-making under impossible pressure. Those are rare qualities. Ma'am, if you're offering me a job, I appreciate it, but I'm not qualified for corporate work. You're qualified for keeping people alive, which is exactly what I need." NextCorp has been dealing with increasing security threats. Industrial espionage, corporate sabotage, and now, apparently armed hijackings. My current security team is competent for normal circumstances. But what happened on that plane wasn't normal circumstances. You have Kiana. She seems capable. She is, but she's never had to make life or death decisions in combat situations. You have. Bianca pulled out a business card, writing something on the back. "This is my private number. I want to offer you a position as Director of Personal Security. The salary is $200,000 a year, full benefits, housing allowance if you need to relocate. But more importantly, regular hours when we're not traveling. You'd be able to actually be present for your daughter's life." Carter stared at the number she'd written. It was more than he made in 2 years at his current jobs combined. "Why?" he asked. "You could hire ex-Secret Service, former FBI, people with impressive credentials. Because when that gun was at my daughter's head, those impressive credentials didn't matter. What mattered was someone who acted without hesitation. Someone whose instinct was to protect, not to calculate risk-benefit ratios." She glanced at Elise, still sleeping. "I'm a single mother raising a daughter alone while running a company. You're a single father doing the same while working 3 jobs. We understand each other's priorities. This is a lot to process." "I know. Think about it. Call me when you get home." "But Mr. Rhodes, I meant what I said earlier. Keeping someone safe isn't just about stopping threats. It's about enabling them to do what they're meant to do. You did that for me and Elise yesterday. I'd like to do the same for you and Summer." Carter looked at the card, then at Bianca, then at the sleeping girl on the couch who was alive because he'd acted. He thought about Summer, home alone again, waiting for him, about the endless cycle of working too much and being present too little. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "That's all I ask." 3 days later, Carter stood outside the NextCorp Industries headquarters in downtown Portland, a sleek glass tower that seemed to touch the clouds. He'd called Bianca the previous evening and accepted her offer. Summer had actually screamed with joy when he told her. Something about finally being able to afford the advanced robotics camp and also having a job with the coolest CEO in tech. Now, standing in the marble lobby with its modern art installations and its efficient staff moving with purpose, Carter felt completely out of place. He was wearing the best clothes he owned, khakis, and a button-down shirt that Summer had helped him pick out, but he still felt like an imposter. Kiana Ford met him in the lobby, her expression neutral but assessing. "Mr. Rhodes, welcome to Next Corps. Before we go up, I need to be direct with you. Miss Anderson hired you over my objection." Carter appreciated the honesty. "Because you don't think I'm qualified. Because I don't know you. You have no corporate security experience. No formal training in executive protection. What you have is combat experience and good instincts. That's valuable, but it's not everything." Fair assessment. However, Miss Anderson trusts her judgment, and her judgment has built a billion-dollar company. So we're going to work together, and you're going to learn everything you should have learned before taking this position. Understood? "Yes, ma'am." Her expression softened slightly. "Call me Kiana. We're going to be spending a lot of time together. Come on, let me show you your new office." The Security Operations Center was on the 23rd floor, a room filled with monitors showing various camera feeds, threat assessment software, and communication systems that looked like they belonged in a spy movie. Carter's office was adjacent, smaller but still larger than his entire apartment's living room. "We'll start with a comprehensive briefing on current threats," Kiana said, pulling up files on a large monitor. "Next Corps has been targeted by competitors, foreign intelligence services, and various criminal organizations interested in our AI developments. The quantum encryption project that Victor mentioned, that's just the tip of the iceberg." She clicked through images. Corporate espionage attempts, cyber attacks, physical security breaches at research facilities. One image showed a car that had been deliberately tampered with, brakes cut. "This was 6 months ago," Kiana explained. "Someone tried to kill Miss Anderson by sabotaging her vehicle. She survived because her daughter had forgotten her tablet at home, so they turned around before getting on the highway. Pure luck." Carter's jaw tightened. "And the person responsible? Never caught. We increased security protocols, but threats keep evolving." She looked at him directly. "Your job is to keep Miss Anderson and Elise alive. That means thinking 3 steps ahead, identifying threats before they materialize, and being ready to act when prevention fails. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Then let's get started. Miss Anderson has a board meeting in 2 hours. You'll shadow me today. Observe protocols. Learn the systems. Questions. Just one. Does Elise have her own security detail? She attends a private school with excellent security. We have a driver who's trained in defensive tactics. Why? Because if someone wants to hurt Miss Anderson, the most effective way is through her daughter. We need to upgrade Elise's protection immediately." Kiana studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I'll add it to today's briefing. Maybe you're going to work out after all, Mr. Rhodes." The rest of the day was a crash course in corporate security. Carter learned about threat levels, emergency protocols, secure transportation routes, and the complex web of people who had motive to harm Bianca Anderson or steal Next Corps' technology. He met the security team, a dozen professionals with various specialties. Most were former law enforcement or military, competent and professional. A few looked at him with skepticism, the new guy who'd gotten the job through dramatic circumstances rather than credentials. Carter didn't blame them. He'd have been skeptical too. Late in the afternoon, Bianca found him in the operations center, studying building floor plans. Elise was with her, carrying a backpack covered in coding-related patches. "How's your first day?" Bianca asked. "Overwhelming, but I'm learning." Elise looked at him with open curiosity. "You're the man from the plane, the one who saved us." "I am. Thank you. I was really scared." "You were very brave," Carter said. "Staying calm when you're afraid is one of the hardest things to do. Mom says you have a mate, daughter my age, little bit older. She's 11. Summer. That's a pretty name. Does she like coding?" "She loves it. She's in robotics club at school." Elise's eyes lit up. I do robotics too. Maybe we could work on a project together sometime. Carter glanced at Bianca, who smiled. If your dad says it's okay, I think that would be wonderful. I think Summer would love that, Carter said, and meant it. As they walked away, Elise talking excitedly about her latest robot design, Kiana appeared at Carter's shoulder. Congratulations, she said quietly. You just passed the most important test. What test? Elise doesn't trust easily. If she likes you, it means something. Miss Anderson values her daughter's judgment above everything else, including mine. She handed him a badge and a phone. Welcome to Next Corps, Director Rhodes. Try not to shoot anyone in the office. Carter laughed despite himself. I'll do my best. The first month at Next Corps was a baptism by fire. Carter learned corporate security protocols, threat assessment matrices, and emergency response procedures, while simultaneously trying to understand the technology sector's unique dangers. But the real adjustment came from the blurred lines between professional duty and personal connection. It started small. Bianca working late on a presentation, forgetting to eat until Carter appeared with takeout from the Thai place down the street. Summer and Elise forming an unlikely friendship, their shared love of robotics and coding creating a bond that transcended their mother's different worlds. Family dinners that happened organically because it was easier than everyone eating alone. 2 months in, Carter found himself at Bianca's penthouse apartment overlooking the Willamette River, ostensibly for a security assessment. But really, because Elise had invited Summer over to work on a robot competition project. The apartment was everything Carter expected. Designer furniture, original artwork, technology, seamlessly integrated into every surface, but it was also surprisingly lived in. Elise's robotics projects covered the dining table. Textbooks and research papers were stacked on the coffee table. Family photos lined the mantel, showing Bianca and Elise at various stages of life, always just the two of them. You're staring, Bianca said, appearing from the kitchen with 2 glasses of wine. She handed him one. At the mess, probably. My housekeeper quit last month. Said she couldn't work for someone who undid all her organizing within hours. I was thinking it looks lived in. Comfortable. Not like a magazine spread. Is that a compliment or criticism? Definitely a compliment. My place looks like a workshop exploded. Summer's projects everywhere. Half-finished repairs I never get to. Dishes in the sink because I worked a double shift. Bianca laughed, settling onto the couch. We're both disasters at the domestic stuff, aren't we? Too busy keeping everything else together to maintain the illusion of having our lives organized. From the other room came excited chatter. The girls were debugging code, their voices overlapping as they argued about the most efficient algorithm for their robot's navigation system. They're good together, Carter observed. Summer's never had many friends. She's always been the smartest person in the room, and young ones don't always appreciate that. Elise has the same problem. Being brilliant and 9 years old doesn't win you many playdates. Bianca swirled her wine. Can I ask you something personal? Sure. Summer's mother. What happened there? Carter was quiet for a moment, debating how much to share. Elena was an artist. Brilliant, creative, completely unpredictable. We met when I was stationed at Fort Lewis. She saw this intense young soldier and thought I'd be her muse or her project or something. We got married too fast. Summer came along, and for a while, it was good. And then reality set in. I got out of the service, had trouble finding work that paid enough. Elena felt trapped. Motherhood wasn't the bohemian adventure she'd imagined. One day, I came home from a job interview, and she was gone. Left a note saying she needed to find herself. Summer was 8. I'm sorry. Don't be. Elena wasn't built for the long term. Summer's better off with stability. Even if that stability comes from a father who works too much and can barely cook. Bianca smiled. You're doing better than you think. Summer's confident, curious, kind. Those don't happen by accident. What about Elise's father? Never in the picture. I used a sperm donor when I was 29. I wanted a family, didn't want to wait for the perfect partner who might never appear. The board thought I was insane. Single mother CEO. They said it would destroy my credibility. Instead, it gave me perspective they'll never have. No regrets? Not about Elise. About missing so much of her life because I'm always working? Daily. Regrets. About the judgment from people who think I can't be both a good mother and a good CEO. I stopped caring years ago. Carter raised his glass. To being disasters who are somehow raising incredible daughters. Bianca clinked her glass against his. I'll drink to that. The moment stretched between them, comfortable and charged simultaneously. Carter was acutely aware that she was his employer, that crossing professional lines was dangerous, that he'd seen too many careers destroyed by office relationships. But he was also aware that Bianca was brilliant, funny, and understood the specific loneliness of single parenthood in a way few people could. Carter, Bianca said quietly, I need to tell you something. The board has been asking questions about your hiring. Some members think I acted impulsively, that your lack of formal credentials is a liability. They're not wrong. Actually, they are. In the 3 months you've been here, we've prevented 2 industrial espionage attempts and identified a data breach that could have cost us millions. Kiana told me your threat assessment skills are better than anyone she's worked with. You see patterns others miss. That's just experience. That's talent. But the board doesn't care about talent if it doesn't fit their predetermined boxes. There's going to be a review of security operations next month. They'll scrutinize every decision, every expense, and especially every personnel choice I've made. They want you to fire me. They want me to admit I made an emotional decision rather than a strategic one. I'm not going to give them that satisfaction. Bianca, if my being here makes your position more difficult, stop. You're here because you're the best person for this job. What happened on that plane proved you have the instincts and capability we need. Everything since has proven you have the intelligence and adaptability. Anyone who can't see that is deliberately blind. Carter set down his wine glass, studying her. Why does this feel like it's about more than just security operations? Because it is. The board has never forgiven me for being a woman who refused to apologize for having a family. They tolerate me because NextCore is successful, but they're always looking for reasons to question my judgment. Hiring you, someone without traditional credentials, someone I met under dramatic circumstances, it fits their narrative that I'm too emotional to lead effectively. That's ridiculous. That's corporate politics. But here's the thing, Carter. I don't make decisions based on what the board wants. I make them based on what's right for this company and my family. You've proven yourself valuable to both. So, we're going to face this review together, show them exactly why you're essential to NextCore's security, and remind them that I built this company on unconventional decisions that everyone said wouldn't work. Before Carter could respond, Summer and Elise burst into the 7 room, their robot clutched between them. Look, Elise exclaimed. We got the navigation working. It can map a room and avoid obstacles completely autonomously. That's impressive, Bianca said, her CEO demeanor replacing the vulnerability she'd shown moments earlier. Show us. They spent the next hour watching the robot navigate the apartment. The girls explaining their code with the kind of enthusiasm that made Carter's chest tight with pride. This was what he'd been fighting for all along, giving Summer opportunities, exposing her to brilliant people, letting her grow into whoever she was meant to become. When it was time to leave, Summer hugged Elise goodbye, making plans for their next session. In the elevator down, she looked at Carter with knowing eyes. You like Miss Anderson, she said. Not a question. She's my employer. That's not what I asked. Carter sighed. His daughter was too perceptive. It's complicated, sweetheart. Adults always say, that when they mean yes, but don't want to admit it. Summer grinned. For what it's worth, I think she likes you too. And Elise told me her mom talks about you all the time. Says you make her feel safe. Summer, I'm just saying, you've been alone for 3 years. It's okay to like someone. I'm not going to fall apart if you're happy. Carter pulled her into a sideways hug as they walked to his truck. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just finally noticed. Driving home through Portland's evening traffic, Carter thought about Bianca's words. About the board review. About the complicated territory they were navigating. He thought about Summer's easy acceptance. About how naturally their families fit together. He thought about the fact that somewhere between protecting Bianca from external threats and working alongside her daily, he'd started caring about her in ways that had nothing to do with professional duty. And judging from the way she looked at him, from the conversations that went deeper than necessary, from the comfortable silences they shared, she felt it too. It was complicated. It was risky. It violated every professional boundary he'd been taught to maintain. It was also, Carter suspected, inevitable. The board review came faster than expected. 3 weeks later, Carter found himself in NextCore's main conference room, facing 8 executives who looked at him like an interesting specimen under a microscope. Cole Palmer, the board chairman and NextCore's largest outside investor, led the questioning. He was in his 60s, silver-haired, with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. Mr. Rhodes, your resume is quite unusual for someone in your position. No college degree. No formal corporate security training. No certifications in executive protection. What exactly qualifies you to protect our CEO? Carter kept his voice level. 6 years of specialized operations experience, including threat assessment, crisis management, and tactical response. 3 months of proven results at NextCore, including preventing 2 industrial espionage attempts and identifying security vulnerabilities that your previous systems missed. Specialized operations. Palmer repeated. That's deliberately vague. What exactly did you do in the service? I can't discuss classified operations, sir, but my record speaks for itself. A woman to Palmer's left, Scylla Harmon from the Finance Committee, leaned forward. The incident on the plane, 2 men died. Are we to understand that NextCore's head of security has killed people? I neutralized an active threat to protect innocent lives, including Miss Anderson and her daughter. The Canadian authorities investigated and cleared me of any wrongdoing. Everything I did was legally justified self-defense. Legally justified doesn't mean it reflects the values of this company. Harmon countered. NextCore is a technology leader, not a paramilitary organization. Some of us question whether someone with your background sends the right message about who we are. Bianca, sitting at the head of the table, finally spoke. The right message is that we take security seriously, that we protect our people and our intellectual property with the same innovation we bring to our products. Carter has done exactly that. Palmer held up a hand. Bianca, no one disputes Mr. Rhodes's effectiveness. The question is whether his hiring represents sound judgment or emotional decision-making. You met him the night before the hijacking, correct? At a corporate event? I did. And within 48 hours of him saving your life, you'd offered him a position paying $200,000 a year. That's not exactly a thorough vetting process. Cole, I built this company by trusting my instincts about people. Those instincts have rarely been wrong. But when they are wrong, the consequences can be catastrophic. Palmer pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table to Bianca. We've received information that concerns us. Mr. Rhodes's ex-wife has filed a formal complaint claiming he's an unfit parent. She's seeking custody of his daughter, citing his dangerous occupation and unstable employment history. This kind of personal turmoil creates security vulnerabilities. Carter's blood ran cold. Elena hadn't contacted him in months. Now she was making a custody play. Bianca's expression hardened. That's a personal matter and has no bearing on Carter's professional performance. Actually, it does, Harmon interjected. If Mr. Rhodes is distracted by custody battles, if his judgment is compromised by personal stress, that directly affects his ability to protect you. More concerning, his ex-wife claims he's been involving his daughter inappropriately with your family, creating dependency, blurring boundaries. Is that true? Our daughters are friends, Bianca said coldly. They share academic interests. There's nothing inappropriate about it. Palmer leaned back, steepling his fingers. Bianca, we're not trying to attack Mr. Rhodes personally, but you must see how this looks. A security director with questionable credentials, hired under emotional circumstances, whose personal life is unstable, whose daughter has become unusually close to your daughter. It creates the appearance of poor judgment at best, conflict of interest at worst. Then your appearance is wrong, Bianca snapped. Carter Rhodes is the most qualified person I've ever worked with in security operations. His background makes him ideally suited for this role. His personal situation is being weaponized by people who don't understand what he's built for his daughter under impossible circumstances. We're not questioning his dedication as a father, Palmer said smoothly. We're questioning whether someone in his position should remain in a role with such access to sensitive information, and to you personally. The implication hung in the air. They weren't just questioning Carter's professional qualifications, they were questioning the nature of his relationship with Bianca. Carter stood abruptly. If I may speak freely? Please, Palmer gestured. You're right, that I don't have traditional credentials. I don't have an MBA or a degree in criminal justice. What I have is the ability to keep people alive in situations where credentials don't matter. I've proven that twice now. Once on a plane when 3 armed men tried to kill Miss Anderson, and consistently over 3 months when your company has faced sophisticated threats. He placed his hands flat on the conference table. As for my personal life, yes, I'm fighting a custody battle initiated by someone who wants money, not parental responsibility. Yes, my daughter has become friends with Miss Anderson's daughter. That happened organically because both young people are brilliant and isolated by that brilliance. I've never used my position inappropriately. Never leveraged my relationship with Miss Anderson for personal gain, never compromised security protocols. But you have developed a personal relationship with Miss Anderson, Harmon stated, beyond professional boundaries. I have tremendous respect for Miss Anderson as my employer and as a person. If that's a conflict of interest in your eyes, then perhaps the problem isn't with me or her. It's with a system that can't imagine 2 single parents might understand each other's challenges without it being inappropriate. Palmer's expression remained neutral. Your loyalty is admirable, Mr. Rhodes. But loyalty doesn't address the fundamental question. Are you the right person for this role? Or are you a liability, disguised as an asset? Before Carter could respond, the conference room door burst open. Kiana Ford rushed in, her usually composed demeanor shattered. We have a situation. Someone just tried to grab Elise from school. The room erupted. Bianca was on her feet instantly, face pale. What happened? Is she safe? She's safe. The school's security detail intervened. But Miss Anderson, this was professional, coordinated, 3 men in a van. They knew exactly when she'd be leaving music class. If our team hadn't been on high alert. Where is she now? Carter was already moving toward the door. Secure location at the school. Police are on site. Call my driver, Bianca ordered. We're leaving now. Palmer stood. Bianca, we're not finished here. She turned, and Carter saw something in her expression he'd never seen before. Pure, cold fury. Yes, Cole, we are. Because while you've been questioning whether Carter is qualified, someone just tried to kidnap my daughter. The same daughter he's been advocating we increase protection for since his first day. The same security vulnerabilities he identified that your previous team missed. So you'll forgive me if I don't particularly care about your concerns right now. She looked at Carter. Let's go get Elise. As they rushed from the building, Kiana briefed them. The men scattered when our security engaged. Police have descriptions but no IDs yet. This wasn't random, Carter. They knew too much. Inside information. Carter confirmed. Someone's been feeding them details about Elise's schedule. Security protocols. We have a leak. In the car, Bianca was making rapid-fire calls, coordinating with police, alerting the school's administration, her hands shaking slightly despite her controlled voice. Carter sat beside her, his mind already running through threat scenarios, calculating risk factors, identifying vulnerabilities. This is because of the quantum encryption, Bianca said quietly, hanging up from another call. They tried to steal it on the plane. That failed. Now they're going after Elise to force my cooperation. We'll increase security. Full protective detail, secure transportation, possibly relocate temporarily. No, Bianca's voice was firm. I won't let my daughter live in fear. I won't let her grow up thinking the world is only danger and threats. Then we eliminate the threat permanently, Carter said. We find whoever's behind this and make sure they can never try again. Their eyes met, an understanding passing between them. This wasn't just professional anymore. Someone had threatened Elise. Someone had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The board wants to know if you're qualified, Bianca said. They're about to find out exactly how qualified you are. At the school, Elise was in the principal's office, pale but composed. When she saw her mother, the composure cracked. She ran into Bianca's arms, and Carter saw Bianca's careful control shatter as she held her daughter, whispering reassurances. Summer was there too. She'd apparently refused to leave when police arrived, insisting she wouldn't abandon Elise. When she saw Carter, relief flooded her face. Dad, I was so scared. These men tried to grab Elise. They had a van and everything. If the security team hadn't been there. Carter pulled her close. But they were there, everyone's safe. For now, Summer said quietly. But they'll try again, won't they? He couldn't lie to her. Probably. Which is why we're going to stop them first. The investigation moved fast. Carter worked with police, with Kiana's team, with contacts from his old life who specialized in tracking people who didn't want to be found. Within 48 hours, they had a picture of the conspiracy. The kidnapping attempt traced back to a shell company with ties to international tech espionage. The same network that had funded the plane hijacking. They wanted Bianca's quantum encryption badly enough to terrorize a 9-year-old. But the inside leak was worse. One of NextCore's senior developers, a man named Hunter Tate, who'd been passed over for promotion twice, had been selling information. Schedule details. Security protocols. Everything needed to target Bianca and Elise effectively. He's been in custody for 6 hours. Kiana told Carter as they reviewed interrogation transcripts. Lawyers already trying to cut a deal. He claims he didn't know they'd target Elise specifically, just thought he was selling corporate secrets. He's lying or stupid, probably both. Carter studied the transcripts. The people he was dealing with. They have a pattern. They identify high-value targets, gather intelligence, then execute coordinated attacks. This wasn't about money, it was about control. So what's our play? We use Tate to draw them out, make them think they have another chance. The plan was risky, bordering on reckless. Carter proposed using Bianca as bait at a public technology conference in Seattle the following week. Leak false information about increased security protocols that actually created vulnerabilities. Let the conspiracy think they had an opening. Absolutely not, Kiana said immediately when he presented it to her and Bianca. You're suggesting we deliberately put Miss Anderson at risk. I'm suggesting we control the risk instead of waiting for them to control it. Right now, they're choosing the time and place. We change that dynamic. Bianca was quiet, processing. What about Elise? Elise stays in Portland with full protective detail. Summer stays with her. They'll be safe at a secure location with people I trust. Absolutely. This isn't about them. It's about you and the encryption technology. And if something goes wrong, then I do what I did on the plane. I stop them, The Seattle conference was held at a waterfront convention center. Massive glass windows overlooking Puget Sound, thousands of attendees, too many variables to control completely. Carter had spent 3 days planning, coordinating with local law enforcement, positioning his own people strategically throughout the venue. The leaked information suggested Bianca would be vulnerable during her keynote speech, that her protective detail would be minimal to avoid appearing paranoid. In reality, Carter had 12 people positioned throughout the auditorium, each with clear lines of sight, each ready to respond in seconds. Bianca delivered her speech with her usual confidence, discussing the future of artificial intelligence, the ethics of emerging technology, never mentioning the encryption project that had made her a target. Carter watched from the side of the stage, his attention not on Bianca but on the crowd, looking for anomalies. He found them in Section J, row 15. 3 men who weren't taking notes, weren't networking, weren't engaged with the presentation. They were watching Bianca with focused intensity, occasionally checking phones, coordinating. Carter signaled Kiana with a subtle gesture. She acknowledged, moving her people into position. The attack came during the Q&A session. A man stood up with what looked like a phone but was actually a signal jammer, disrupting communications. Simultaneously, 2 others moved toward the stage from different angles. Carter was already moving. He intercepted the first attacker at the stairs, a textbook takedown that looked like security assisting an overenthusiastic attendee. Kiana's team grabbed the second. The third tried to run, but found exits blocked by local police who'd been briefed and positioned. The whole thing took 90 seconds. Minimal disruption, maximum effectiveness. Most attendees didn't even realize what had happened. In the secure room afterward, while police processed the arrested men, Bianca sat with her head in her hands. "It's over," Carter said quietly. "We have them. Everyone involved. They can't touch you or Elise again." "How do you know?" "Because the people we arrested are cooperating. They're giving up everyone in the network. By tomorrow, the FBI will have dismantled the entire operation. You'll be safe." Bianca looked up at him, eyes red but determined. "The board was right to question your hiring. Not because you're unqualified, but because you're dangerous. You see threats everywhere. You live in a world where violence is always the answer." Carter felt something inside him crack. "You're right. Maybe you should find someone else. I'm not finished. You're dangerous and violent, and you see threats everywhere. And that's exactly what Elise and I need. Because the world is dangerous. Threats are real. And you're the only person who's kept us safe when everyone else was still debating the risk assessment." She stood, crossing to where he Saturday. "The board called an emergency meeting while we were here. They wanted to force me to fire you. Said your plan was reckless. Said I was letting personal feelings cloud my judgment." "What did you tell them?" "I told them that personal feelings are what make good judgment possible. That I trust you not because I don't see your flaws, but because I understand that your flaws are precisely what make you effective. That being willing to act, to take risks, to put yourself in danger for others, those aren't weaknesses. They're exactly what true strength looks like." "Bianca." "I'm also stepping down as CEO." Carter's head snapped up. "What?" "Not permanently, but I'm taking an advisory role for the next year. Kiana's going to manage day-to-day operations. I'm going to focus on research, on being present for Elise, on actually living my life instead of just managing it." "The board agreed to that?" "The board didn't have a choice. I own controlling interest. They work for me, not the other way around. And I'm using that power to do what I should have done years ago. Choose my daughter over corporate expectations." She paused. "I'm also choosing you. If you'll have me. Not as your employer, but as whatever we've been becoming these past few months." Carter stood, closing the distance between them. "The custody battle with Elena is going to get ugly. The media attention from all this will make it worse. You'll be dragged through it. Then we'll face it together. I have excellent lawyers, and Summer deserves better than a mother who abandoned her. We'll make sure that doesn't happen. The board will use this against you. Let them try. I built NextCore. They can't take that away because I chose to have a personal life. Carter pulled her close, and she came willingly, her head resting against his chest. This is complicated, he said quietly. Everything worth having is complicated. Summer's going to be insufferably smug. She predicted this months ago. Bianca laughed, the sound releasing tension they'd both been carrying. Elise bettered $20 that we'd figure it out by the end of the year. Looks like she wins. Our daughters are terrifying. They're brilliant. There's a difference. When they returned to Portland, it was to find Summer and Elise. Having built an entire autonomous robot system that could map their secure location and alert security to anomalies, the girls were simultaneously thrilled about the adults finally admitting their feelings and annoyed it had taken so long. Elena's custody challenge fell apart within weeks. Carter's lawyers, funded by Bianca's resources, presented overwhelming evidence of her abandonment and his dedicated parenting. The judge's ruling was swift and definitive. Full custody to Carter. Elena could apply for supervised visitation if she completed parenting classes and maintained stable employment for 6 months. Elena didn't bother. True to form, she was already moving on to the next thing, the next place, the next version of herself that didn't include responsibility. The conspiracy behind the kidnapping attempt was dismantled. Federal charges, international cooperation. Everyone involved facing serious prison time. NextCore's security was upgraded, protocols strengthened, vulnerabilities eliminated. Cole Palmer resigned from the board 6 months later, citing philosophical differences with company direction. Several others followed. Bianca replaced them with people who understood that technology companies needed to operate with humanity, not just efficiency. 1 year after the hijacking, Carter stood in the backyard of the house he and Bianca had bought together in the West Hills of Portland. Not a mansion, but spacious enough for 2 families that had merged into one. It had a workshop for Summer's robotics projects, a home office for Bianca's research, a treehouse that both girls claimed neither used anymore but secretly still visited. Summer and Elise were inside, supposedly doing homework but more likely debugging code for their latest competition robot. At 13 and 11, they'd become formidable partners, winning regional competitions and attracting attention from tech companies eager to sponsor young innovators. Bianca emerged from the house carrying 2 beers, handing him one. Kiana called. Another company tried to poach you, offering $300,000 and full benefits package. And I told her to increase your salary to match. Can't have my head of security getting stolen by the competition. I'm also your husband. Doesn't that create a conflict of interest? Probably. But since I'm no longer CEO, it's not really my problem. Kiana can deal with the board's complaints. They'd married 6 months ago, a small ceremony with just family and close friends. Summer had been the maid of honor, Elise the flower girl. Both girls had cried, then laughed at themselves for crying, then cried more, because they were happy. Carter still worked for NextCore, though his role had evolved. He'd built a security division that was now industry-leading, training other companies on threat assessment and response. He consulted on corporate security internationally, always with Bianca's safety as his primary focus, but expanding his expertise beyond just one person. Bianca had been true to her word, stepping back from daily operations to focus on research. She'd published 3 groundbreaking papers on AI ethics in the past year. The quantum encryption project had been completed, licensed to 3 governments under strict humanitarian conditions, generating revenue that NextCore was funneling into educational programs for underprivileged students in STEM fields. Summer got accepted to the Advanced Placement Program at Portland Tech Institute, Carter said. Full scholarship. She'll be taking college-level courses starting next fall. Of course she did. She's brilliant. She wants to work at NextCore eventually. Following in Elise's footsteps, she says. Elise wants to start her own company. By the time she's 18, apparently running NextCore isn't ambitious enough. They laughed, the sound carrying across the yard. A year ago, Carter had been working 3 jobs, barely keeping his head above water, fighting to give Summer opportunities he couldn't afford. Now he was living a life that still felt surreal some mornings when he woke up. "Do you ever think about the plane?" Bianca asked quietly. "About what would have happened if you hadn't been there?" "Every day. But not the way you think. I don't think about the violence or the danger. I think about the moment I saw you protecting Elise, the way you'd have died before letting anyone hurt her. I recognized that. I understood it completely because I'd have done the same for Summer. And that's when you knew you'd act. That's when I knew I had to, because I saw myself in you. Single parent doing everything possible to protect their young one. I couldn't let that end badly, not when I had the ability to stop it." Bianca leaned against him, comfortable and close. "That's what Cole Palmer never understood. He thought you acted out of training or instinct. But it was empathy. You saw someone fighting the same fight you were fighting, and you refused to let them lose. Is that why you hired me? Because you saw the same thing? I hired you because you saved my life. I fell in love with you because of how you love Summer. The dedication, the sacrifice, the way you've built a life for her despite impossible obstacles. That's who you are at your core. Not the violence, not the danger, but the unwavering commitment to protecting what matters." They were quiet for a moment, watching the sun set over Portland, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. "Summer asked me something yesterday," Carter said. "She wanted to know if I was happy. Not content, not satisfied, but actually happy." "What did you tell her?" "I told her yes. For the first time in my adult life, I'm actually happy. Not just surviving, not just fighting to keep things together, but genuinely happy. And that feels almost as terrifying as the hijacking." "Why terrifying?" "Because I have more to lose now. You, Elise, the life we've built. When it was just me and Summer struggling through, the stakes were high but simple. Now there's complexity, there's vulnerability, there's the constant awareness that everything could disappear." Bianca turned to face him. "That's not fear, Carter. That's love. Real love always comes with the terror of loss. But the alternative is never loving at all. Never risking, never allowing yourself to be vulnerable. That's not living. That's just existing. When did you get so wise?" "I'm a tech CEO who married her bodyguard after he saved her from hijackers. Wisdom was clearly never my strong suit." He kissed her, soft and familiar, and still somehow electric after a year. "I love you. I love you too. Now come inside. The girls bet on whether we'd have a sentimental moment at sunset, and we need to make sure nobody wins, so they learn not to gamble on our relationship." Inside, Summer and Elise were exactly where Carter expected them to be, huddled over a laptop, arguing about code optimization with the focused intensity of people who cared more about algorithms than social norms. "How's it going?" Bianca asked. "We're debugging the navigation protocol," Summer said, without looking up. "Elise thinks we should use a recursive function, but I think iterative is more efficient." "Both approaches have merit," Carter offered. "Dad, you barely understand what we're talking about. No offense. None taken, but I know enough to know that collaboration usually beats solo optimization. Try combining your approaches." The girls looked at each other, then back at the screen. "That could actually work," Elise admitted. Bianca and Carter exchanged smiles. Their daughters, brilliant and stubborn and absolutely certain they were right. Learning slowly that being right alone was less valuable than being effective together. Later that night, after the girls were asleep, Carter found himself in the workshop he'd set up in the garage. He was cleaning his service weapon, a ritual from his old life that he'd never quite abandoned. The familiar motions were meditative, grounding. Bianca appeared in the doorway, watching him work. "Do you miss it? The adrenaline, the danger, the certainty of combat situations?" Carter considered the question. "Sometimes. The clarity of knowing exactly what needs doing, the simplicity of clear objectives. But then I think about what I'd be missing. Summer's robotics competitions. Elise explaining quantum mechanics like I understand half of it. Mornings with you, before the chaos of the day starts. I'll take this complexity over that clarity any day. You saved us, Bianca said quietly. On that plane, you saved our lives. But I think we saved yours too. Gave you a reason to be more than just a provider. More than just protection. Gave you a family that chose you, not out of obligation or circumstance, but because of who you are. Carter set down the weapon, crossing to her. I've been thinking about that moment on the plane. The split second before I acted. I wasn't thinking about heroism, or duty, or any of that. I was thinking about Summer, about how she'd feel if she lost me, about how you were looking at Elise the same way I looked at Summer. That's what pushed me forward, not training, not instinct, connection. And now I wake up, every day grateful that connection exists, grateful that I was in seat 7 amperes, grateful that I acted instead of hesitating, grateful that you saw something in me worth building a life around. Bianca smiled. The girls have a theory. They think the universe put you on that plane specifically, that it was fate or destiny or whatever they're calling it this week. What do you think? I think I don't care if it was fate or random chance. I only care that it happened, that you were there, that you acted, that we found each other in the absolute worst circumstances and somehow turned it into the best thing that ever happened to us. They stood together in the workshop, surrounded by tools and half-finished projects, the detritus of a life being actively built rather than just endured. Outside, Portland slept. Inside, their daughters dreamed of robots and algorithms and futures bright with possibility. Carter Rhodes had started as a desperate single father working 3 jobs to give his daughter a chance. He'd become a hero by accident, stopping a hijacking because his instinct was to protect. And now, a year later, he was simply a man who'd found his place in the world, not through grand design, but through small moments of courage that accumulated into something larger. Sometimes heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they're just exhausted single parents trying to make it home. And sometimes, when they choose to act instead of freeze, when they trust their instincts over their fears, they discover that saving someone else's life can save your own. The story that started at 38,000 feet with a gun pressed to a young girl's head had ended here, in a garage workshop in Portland, with 2 families merged into one, with love that came from shared understanding, with futures that held promise instead of just survival. Carter Rhodes had saved Bianca Anderson and Elise Porter on a hijacked plane, but they'd saved him right back, pulling him from the edge of burnout and desperation into a life worth living. That's how transformation works. Not in grand gestures or dramatic moments, but in the daily choice to keep showing up, keep protecting, keep loving, keep building something better than what came before. And in the end, that's the only heroism that really matters. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.